long ball number 3. Question here. How
Mhm.
does NIL, the name, image, likeness, college players getting paid, change the incentives for young American soccer players? A new article asks the age-old question, what if America's top athletes became soccer players? Interesting article bringing up the old question by Sanjay Sujant Kumar of Yahoo Sports. Your take on, it's a timeless question,
Mhm.
but the field goal posts moved a little bit with the NIL.
Yeah, the headline actually reads, "What if our best athletes," and that's in scare quotes, "never choose soccer? How NIL money could shape the U.S. men's national team future." Now, let's just acknowledge that this is extremely speculative and sort of hypothetical, and there's at least some argument. I'm not blaming Sanjay for writing the piece. I think it is informative and
It's timely.
interesting. But there is an argument that you can make is like, well, look, it's not like we've got enough soccer players who are multi-sport athletes who this might matter for, except as comes out in the piece when you hear from Kyle Martino, for example, who is quoted, and Kyle Martino is a guy who's trying to make soccer more accessible to a lot of communities who maybe not don't have the opportunity to have soccer be part of their sporting culture. He's got the Over Under Initiative, which is a plan to turn basketball courts into futsal courts, in addition to being basketball courts, not to tear down basketball nets and hoops, but to put in goals that can be popped up. He's got something called the golfer. He's been working on this for years. It kind of pops up and becomes a goal, and then you can play soccer on the same patch of concrete, the same patch of asphalt you play basketball. And so he's quoted in here because the idea is, if NIL is on the table, if if players, if athletes can go to college and make money, really, really good money, like significant money, will they choose soccer? Not when they have that opportunity to go to college. It's not like being 17 and going, am I going to go play basketball in college where I can make some cash, football in college where I make some cash, or am I going to go be a soccer player? It's when they're 8, 9, 10, 11. And sometimes it won't even be up to them, or they won't ultimately be making the decision independently. It'll be parents who are pushing players towards sports, revenue sports, where they can make money. Maybe it used to be, Rob, that coaches, that players rather would end up in positions where their parents would spend money on their soccer education, meaning spend money on club soccer, which is extremely expensive, pay to play and all that. With the idea being they're going to go get a college scholarship, right? They'll be able to play at Clemson, or able to play at SMU, or they'll be able to play at one of these soccer schools, and that will help pay for their education. And so you sort of were justifying the spend at the youth level because of what it could mean when they got to college. But obviously, if soccer is not a sport that is generating NIL money, and parents and kids look at this and go, I don't have to be pro to make money. Maybe the incentives now change, and those athletes who may be good enough to choose between sports, especially when they're 8, 9, and 10, and they're not completely formed as players, maybe they won't go in the soccer direction. Maybe that will be something that causes a problem for the talent pool later on down the road.
The article talks about why the football and basketball, the accessibility, and the beaten path towards financial reward is obvious and clear. And then now in the NIL era, it's reported that the average salary for these college players in a top 4 conference is over. It's in the 6 figures for the average football player in one of the top 4 conferences, and
Right.
that is less than what the base salary for a professional major league soccer player is. And so that puts that in perspective. So if soccer has to become very easy and almost like proof of concept. Like if you're going to kind of wager or pick your lane for becoming a professional athlete, what could make soccer an
Yeah.
obvious path? I mean, and
Well,
any homegrown American player at all, like what's the path? Like you go to this academy and you jump around here, and then you go to an NPSL team, and then maybe you go to a college, and then maybe you get drafted. Like
look,
that's not
obviously,
like I do well in high school, I go to college for some time and then go pro.
yeah.
Like it's not a clear path.
Yeah.
There's not that many American players where like he became a millionaire because he went soccer.
No, not that many examples. Obviously there are people, there are players, and this is why I don't know that this should be overstated. Like I imagine we should be careful about getting too far ahead of ourselves on this being a problem, because a guy like Christian Pulisic was always going to be a soccer player because his dad was a soccer player and because it's in the family. Now he also was sort of privileged in the sense that soccer was extremely accessible to him. Even going over to England and training with clubs when he was young and his dad was visiting and all these things. Like that's not things that normal players get to do. So obviously what's at issue here, what Sanjay writes about, and when he talks to Chris Richards, who comes from Birmingham, Alabama, probably the most football place of football places, or at least
Right.
among them. And he says, I was pushed into football. I wanted to play, but my mom wouldn't let me, which, that may be a thing. But he was also a basketball player. And he's obviously got the height to at least have played maybe in college. And if it was always out there that he could have gone and gotten a college scholarship or gone to college and then made money while he was in college, rather than signing for FC Dallas when he was a teenager, then maybe he wouldn't have chosen soccer. And he says what was interesting is before NAL, when he was a pro, he was already a pro making money playing for FC Dallas because he signed a contract. He never played for Dallas. He ended up going over to Bayern Munich. But he said when he would come home, he'd have money to spend and go out with his friends, and they wouldn't have any. And the kids who went to college would have no money. Obviously, that has changed dramatically in those revenue sports. And now with the lawsuit that has meant that the players get paid directly, you're hearing about players making 6 figures, 7 figures in college, and not everybody will make that. But I think there is even a stat in there about sort of the average starter for a football team at the top division in the Division 1 level, the championship, the BCS level, or whatever we're calling it now, base salary of something like $104,000 is the base salary in Major League Soccer. Now that, obviously players can make more. While there's a lack of transparency around exactly how much college athletes are earning, that figure is below the estimated range for Power 4 conference football starters, essentially at every position this year, right? So every player who is a starter, now, again, whether or not you're going to be a starter could be up in the air. Like there's lots of things you have to consider with this. And I guess I don't know that I see this as a problem yet. I feel like it's probably too soon to know whether the incentives changing will mean that the quote unquote best athletes or that soccer is going to lose out, because I think the cultural barriers to soccer getting those level of athletes don't change dramatically just because there's money on the table.
Because I exist largely in the summer soccer realm, where in the USL2, where 99% of the players are college athletes, kind of opens the door to, we had to tiptoe around like what we could provide for players, what we couldn't. And NIL is definitely like that, those weird gray areas. And if I get someone a hamburger, are they going to lose their college scholarship? Like that's gone right out the window. So that like kind of makes that easier.
Yeah.
But with those teams getting older and the divisions and more familiarity, like the owners are getting more and more competitive. So I'm curious if the NIL stuff will spill over more and more into the summer amateur realm
And
as well.
this is not directly connected to this story, because again, this is, we're not talking about college. We're not talking about soccer players doing this because of college questions. We're saying soccer players may not choose to sign with academies and go through that pathway if being an athlete in a different sport might be making more money. Again, this is only applicable to players, to young athletes who might be good enough in multiple sports. We're talking about the inception point. Now, you're not going to get LeBron James to have been a soccer player. He was always going to be too big. It was never going to happen. That's why the best athletes conversation is kind of ridiculous to start with. Because when you think best athletes, you're thinking about oversized individuals, human beings of super proportions who could not be soccer players anyway. What we're really talking about is whether or not people give up on their dream of being a football player and because of size, who would play soccer, but maybe don't now because, hey, I can get to college, pay for my college, and make money, even if I'm not going to be a pro, even if I'm not going to be an NBA player or an NFL player, right? So this is about the inception point, because the way the soccer pathway works traditionally, and it's starting to work more and more in this country, is you're not going to go to college to play soccer. So, and again, you're not probably going to make a lot of NAL money in soccer in college anyway. So if you are truly committed to soccer, it's not going to change for you. You're not going to go, oh, well, there's football money out there, because if you're 5'6" and 140 pounds, there's only one sport for you, brother. I'm sorry. That's where it is. But again, like, if this changes the incentives, and particularly if you imagine that American soccer could improve by getting players in communities that where the sport is not otherwise a big deal or is only just now growing in cultural importance, if the incentives are now even more intense, that being a basketball player, being a football player, being those things are is more enticing, and you stay longer in that sport in the bid to reach that level, then you are not going to be a professional soccer player because you'll be too far behind the curve. And I
So,
think that's part of this.
real quick, don't want to dwell on this too long, but I'd say this: top athletes in America picking soccer or not. How do you, when someone a soccer civilian, if you will, asks you a question, how do you answer that?
About the best athletes thing?
Yeah, like what if LeBron James plays soccer? Would
No,
America be good?
it's what Super Nintendo Chalmers just said in the chat. Our best athletes are only the best in a specialized field. Stop glazing them like they can do everything. They can't. Right? It's ridiculous to make the argument that if LeBron James had decided to play soccer instead of basketball, he would have been one of the best soccer players in the world. You have no way of knowing that. You have no way of knowing that. Right? There's no this again. This is it's so reductive because it goes from the end point and tries to work backwards. Oh, that's the best athlete in the world because he's very good at this one sport. It doesn't work that you can just rewind time, have him change sports, and still be as successful in that other sport. It doesn't work that way. That's the logic falls apart pretty easily. So that's what I tell people. Now they don't want to hear it because for them the 1+1 = 2. You take the best athlete from another sport. Well, if only he had been a soccer player, we could be World Cup champions right now, Rob. That's not true. Our sports are extremely specialized, as he said, as Super Nintendo Chalmers said. And you have to be specialized in your sport. Now, part of the story from Sanjay is also about that, right? And that's kind of what I was getting to, the specialization thing. And that's what Kyle Martino was saying. If we are encouraging people to specialize early, which society already does, the money, the incentives already do, and now there's even more incentive to not play soccer, then does that push away players who otherwise might choose it? And look, Chris Richards is a good example. What is he, 6'3"? Right? He might not have been an incredible basketball player if he had stuck with basketball and not chosen to play soccer. But there's a chance he could have gotten a college gig, gotten to a school, made some money if NIL was on the table, right? It doesn't mean he would have been the best player in his, he didn't mean he would have been an NBA player one day. It just means that he didn't choose soccer, and we lose out on Chris Richards and what he is now.
Indeed, and we'll keep our eye on this as we progress in the story and how NIL impacts soccer here in the United States.